In a moment, Joe Diamond joins us as we talk about hauntings, so get ready as we get closer and closer to Halloween. Well, just a few moments ago, we had the very sad news about one of our great listeners, Louise, the reincarnated Cleopatra. And Tom took a call from an individual in the Kentucky area who told you exactly what, Tom?
Well, you know, I'm not real happy about this, but he told me he was a neighbor of Louise's. And he went to the arts festival out there, and he found out that she had passed away in February. And, you know, people call, and sometimes you have no reason not to believe them, and especially when it comes to our listeners, because we value our listeners. And
well, especially when we haven't heard from her in months.
Exactly. And so, you know, I said, George, run with it. And what do we got, George?
Well, we have some good news because on the line is Louise in Kentucky. You're very much alive, Louise.
George, when I heard you say that I had passed, I jumped up from my bed. I said, let me call in. Why are people doing this to me?
Unbelievable. And how? Well, are you okay? You feel okay and all that?
I'm fine. But I took a rest because I won't even go into detail on what I've been through, but it was like, Wendell, you need a break. So I was like, okay, I'll take a break. So I'm laying here in my bed, resting, listening to Coast to Coast. I hear George Norrie say, Louise of Kentucky has passed away. I jumped up. I said, let me call Coast to Coast right now and clear this up. And so I told Tommy, I said, Tommy, I don't know why people are messing with me. You know, it was like they've been doing it all of my life.
Is it possible that the caller actually thinks that you did pass away?
No. There's no reason. First of all, I don't talk to nobody. I don't tell nobody my business. And there are a lot of people that want me DEAD. But no, George, I am still here. You see how excited I am because it was like people are still messing with me, even when I take time out to just relax.
See, you can't do that anymore, Louise. You got to keep calling in on the show.
George, I can't keep calling in. I got a lot of things to do. But I appreciate you all thinking of me. And look, I listen to you all the time. Sometimes I don't. But tonight was a special night.
I'm glad you were listening, and I'm glad you called in. You take care, and you're always in our prayers, okay?
Well, if I need help, I'll let you know.
You got it, Louise. Thanks. Well, that's some good news there, that Louise is alive and kicking. And to the caller who called in, I hope you really thought something had happened to her, but if you were trying to pull a joke on us, not smart. And welcome back to Coast. Joe Diamond back with us. May look like a normal guy, but he has turned into his fascinations for the strange and mysterious into a full-time career. He is even a world record holder for solving the world's largest corn maze. We'll talk about that. He did it blindfolded. He happens to be the longest artist in residence at the Dole Mansion in Crystal Lake, Illinois. He's the official mind reader at the luxurious Maxwell Mansion in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And, yep, both of those places are historic buildings, and they are haunted. Joseph, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back again, George. This is like the fourth or fifth time we get to sit down and chat. And it's, it was an honor to just do it once, and it's especially an honor that you keep asking me back. So thank you again.
We think the world of you. Hey, tell us a little bit about the corn maze, how you manipulated yourself around there blindfolded.
Yeah, so it was, that was back in 2010 already. That was like my first big break in the Midwest. So there's a bunch of corn mazes out here. I'm right in between Chicago and Milwaukee, right on the Wisconsin-Illinois border. And there's a farm called Richardson Farm that every year boasts the world's largest corn maze. They do a different design each year. And the year I solved it blindfolded was 11.1 miles of trail that spanned over 38.8 acres. Apologize for that. And, yeah, I had several people from the newspaper there to verify everything was legitimate. I was blindfolded, and I got through it in 2 hours and 50 minutes, which the next shortest time to get through it just cited it was about 3.5 hours. So technically my record is for just solving it. Whether or not I was blindfolded was just an added psychic bonus for me. And I had a reporter from the Northwest Herald holding onto my wrist using a technique many of your listeners will have seen many performers use, known as Hellstromism or contact mind reading, using basically the same way using an idiomotor response or a pendulum or dowsing rods or a Ouija board. It's just I was the Ouija board in a sense. The person's thoughts was able to go through me, and I was able to go where they were thinking, while at the same time I was able to solve the maze all at the same time.
I love that, the human Ouija board. What have you been up to since you were last on with me about 10 months ago?
Yeah. So I was gearing up to be at the Woodstock Opera House for the first time. Spoiler alert, it went very well. We sold the place out, so they asked me to come back for Halloween. So we're doing 2 shows there this week, one this coming Friday and one on Halloween night. A very, very quick background for your listeners. It's famous from the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. It's the Pennsylvania Hotel briefly in the film. There's a scene where Bill Murray is reliving the same day over and over, and there's a scene where he jumps out of a high tower, and that tower is, in fact, that theater. We talked a little bit about this last time, but just to go over it again, it is the first stage that Orson Welles performed on and also directed on as well. It's actually now called the Orson Welles stage. Great actors like Shelley Berman and Paul Newman performed on that stage over the years. And throughout the years, many legends and many different hauntings, and some confirmed, some not confirmed, have come about in that place. And I have been researching it diligently for the last 10 months, because when I was there in February, I just did what my standard show is, which is just mind reading, having people think of things like names of their first crush or their PIN codes or memories from their past, things like that, and trying to divine what they're thinking of for about an hour and a half. Well, this Halloween, that's only going to be half the show. The first half is going to be mind reading. We'll be picking people at random from throughout the audience. We'll talk a little bit about later on, if you want, how people can participate if they want or not, because some people are terrified of being up in front of a room full of strangers, even if they're not having their minds read. So I have ways of getting around that. So everyone is having fun. And then the second half is a little top secret. We'll talk. I'm actually going to share some new information about the second half special with you tonight that I haven't shared anywhere yet, mostly because we've just been keeping it a secret the last few months. But I've been researching the history of the building nonstop and all the different paranormal occurrences that have been going on there, and interviewing staff members with their stories. And the whole second half is going to be about the paranormal history of the building and why it is known as one of the most haunted locations in the Midwest, and possibly even the whole state of Illinois.
Joe, what do you think? What makes a building haunted? Why?
There's lots of different theories. Being a mind reader, I'm going to share my theory. My current theory is, first of all, we are storytelling creatures. We love sharing stories about, fears and excitement and stories that are a little dangerous, but the very act of sharing those stories means we survived, means that we're here right now to, what's the phrase? We lived to tell the story. So there is that. And one of the stories that is most known at the Woodstock Opera House is the story of Elvira, who is an actress who apparently, all things as the stories and legend goes, was an actress who was shunned by her lover and eventually ended up killing herself. Now, unfortunately, there are about 4 or 5 different stories as to how she killed herself. There are stories about her jumping out of a tower. There are stories about her hanging herself. There are stories about her poisoning herself. Unfortunately, this seems to have a little bit of, the Jaws effect, how like everyone claimed to see more sharks when the movie Jaws came out. It seems like whenever there's something, like for example, when Groundhog Day came out and Bill Murray's character, or really his stunt double, jumps out of the tower, everyone started talking about that's how that actress Elvira must have died. She must have jumped out of the tower. When there's so many stories, and to be fair, the more research I've done, there's not a clear cause of death. We know she definitely existed, and we know she did commit suicide, and there's even a seat named or dedicated to her in the theater, seat DD113 in the balcony.
And this, by the way, is not the Elvira that is in her 70s, the former actress. This is a different one.
This is not Cassandra Peterson. No, Elvira has a good couple decades on even her from existing. I found a couple newspaper articles from, I believe, the 50s that name her Elvira. So even from then, there was the ghost named Elvira. Those ones claim that she just took some sleeping pills and went to sleep in her dressing room to get her. But the stories, the one thing that's true of them all is that she was, heartbroken, and she took her own life. And what's fascinating, and for me, it's what makes a place haunted is the stories we tell about it. Like, to me, to a certain extent, the fact that all these different people have these different stories about the history, and that we don't know, the fact that our minds literally cry out for these stories when we don't have the answers, I think just is really, really important. And I think in many ways that's what causes our minds to, for lack of a better term, haunt a place. Now, there's also many, many other stories about the building. There are some people who are confirmed to have passed away in the building as well. There was a fire at the turn of the century that broke out during a performance. Shockingly, only one casualty passed away from that, and it was a sold-out performance. People were literally leaping out of the building onto the roof of the building next door. And, it's not a small place. It holds 411 people, and it was also City Hall for a while as well. So this person was all the way down on the ground floor. They died due to smoke inhalation from the fire. But considering that, that broke out during a sold-out performance and, was the only casualty, to my mind, is a minor miracle. Because the fact that no one was trampled or broke their neck jumping out a window or anything like that is again, amazing when you think about it. And I do feel like there's a lot of great stories there that we do have a lot of information about, that even people who have lived in the area their entire lives, myself included, don't know about the building. They've just heard the Elvira story through a friend of a friend of a friend. And so that's the big thing that I really want to bring to the show, which is to give people some information from this building's history that even they didn't know about, but also give them a chance to see how much of that building's history they can feel when they're inside of it.
How many ghosts do you think are haunting, for example, the Woodstock Theater?
I would say that there are at least 2, possibly more. There's definitely, the presence which is known as Elvira, and then the person who passed away in the fire, definitely for sure. There's also a lot of theories as to different areas in the building. Like, for example, a lot of people say that the basement is haunted, but which would have been where the person from the fire would have died.
Mm-hmm.
Also, some of the offices up on the second floor, which wouldn't really have a reason to have a lot of activity in them, as far as I can find, other than that they're at the end of a very, very creepy hallway, and if someone's leaving a big haunted building at night, and that's where their offices are, and that's where they've got to leave. Again, we tend to, and again, when you're scared of those things and you say those things, you tend to put that type of stuff out there sometimes. And so I think some people are definitely more open to it. It is funny because there's like two people at the staff who have been there for about 10 years, and one of them is like very, very staunchly skeptical, who's like, nope, nothing weird's ever happened to me. I mean, the lights have flickered, but that's electrical. But I mean this, and the other one has had nothing happen to them in 10 years, but they want something to happen. So
right,
badly.
and they believe it.
So it's funny how like the two people who haven't had anything happen to them are on complete opposite ends of the belief spectrum, which is. But that's the other fun thing of it too, is no matter whether you believe or disbelieve, everyone there has some kind of story or has found some piece of history about this place. So real quick with the balcony, seat DD113, during rehearsals when the theater is empty, actors will be on stage rehearsing, and that seat will just go down all by itself, almost like an invisible presence is sitting in it, settling in for a private performance. I haven't had anything like that happen in the seat, but I have definitely felt different sitting in that seat versus other areas in the theater as well.
That is truly amazing. Do you consider yourself, Joseph, psychic?
Yes, with one big caveat. I believe we all are. I believe we're all psychic. I think calling myself psychic is no different than calling myself human or blonde or any of that stuff. I think we all have tendencies. They may be different tendencies. Like, for example, I have a friend who is a psychic medium. She's been seeing spirits since quite a young age, and I've definitely had my fair share of spooky phenomena that's happened to me. And again, we can get into that later, and I definitely talk about it at the Woodstock Opera House shows. But I haven't. The joke I always say is, yes, I talk to ghosts, but I don't ever hear anything back. But when it comes to, we all have our intuitive hunches. We all have our moments where we think of something, all of a sudden someone says something, we go, oh my God, I was just thinking about that. I really see what I do with mind reading, just, a way of sending and receiving information. It's a way of, and it's two ways. It's, me thinking of something and sending it to someone, and also receiving other people's thoughts. And when you look at it that way, for me, being psychic just means paying attention. I mean, how often has someone made a decision and then gone, oh, I should have gone with my first gut instinct? Well, that just means they weren't paying attention to that side of themselves. And, the definition of a psychic is someone in touch with a non-physical force. And I think that's all of us.
We're going to take a quick break, Joe, and come back and talk about some of your mind-reading abilities as well and how you do what you do. Joe Diamond with us. His website is americasgreatestmindreader.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com for you. But we will be back, and we'll take calls with Joe next hour here on Coast to Coast AM. So don't touch your dial. We will be right back. And welcome back, George Norrie, along with Joe Diamond. We're going to take calls next hour with Joe as we talk about the haunted paranormal. Joe, tell us about your mind-reading abilities. How did you master that?
Well, I grew up watching many different kinds of, Tales of the Unexplained shows, and like many of your listeners, nothing super, ironically, out of the ordinary there. But the people that really kind of stuck out to me were the people like, the amazing Kreskin and Uri Geller and people like Darren Brown in the UK was just becoming popular when I was a teenager. And lots of other people. I found books on people such as David Hoy, who there's a great book on him called Super Psychic, where he had his own radio show in Chicago, he started in Chicago performing on stage, but then had his own radio show out of, I believe, Pennsylvania. But people would call in and just make these, ask him questions like, where did I lose this object? And he would just tell them, just plainly say, oh, it's in the drawer in the table across the room for you, second drawer down. And that would be where the necklace was. And I was always fascinated with, the power of the mind and everything from...
Oh, you there, Joe?
...to being able to, look at someone's palm and read the lines and tell their fortunes. So I did as much of that as I could. Unfortunately, I went to a very, very strict religious school that kind of looked down on all of that, which didn't allow me to do it as much as I wanted. But at the same time, every time they said, oh, don't get into that stuff, it could lead to, other things, that just made me want to do it more. And so I got books on everything, again, from contact mind reading to there's a lot of techniques such as, again, like palmistry and tarot.
Did you self-teach yourself?
To a large extent, yes. I did manage to have some great mentors in the Chicagoland area. There was a gentleman by the name of Marshall Brodeen who, in the Chicagoland area, people would remember him as Wizzo, the Wacky Wizard, and he was famous for selling something called TV magic cards. But what a lot of people don't know is he spent most of his career as a legitimate stage hypnotist. And while I don't do any like trance work or anything like that, he worked with me a lot about how to stand on stage and how to talk to an audience. And he turned me on to a lot of like these very highly specialized books that you had to you couldn't just go to the library and get. You had to know someone who could, set you up with the right set of tools or materials and such. And he really encouraged me to look into the works of previous psychic entertainers and mind readers, and to really go down that path. And and that was a big aspect of it. I still teach a lot of myself the techniques. The big area where other people's insights come in is from the show aspect, how to stage something, whether to keep the person I'm reading in the audience or on stage, for example, or if I bring 4 people on stage, do I stand them all in a row to my left, all in a row to my right, 2 to the left, 2 to the middle? If you watch the old, just for example, like Kreskin shows or just clips of Uri Geller from his early TV appearances, Uri was a huge, huge influence on me, and I was a joy to, when I had my own radio show a few years back, I had the pleasure of talking with him, and he's incredible. I mean, it was just a dream come true to talk with.
Well, I think he's the real deal, Joe.
Oh, absolutely, and he has the ability to just talk to you as if you are the only person in the world. And it's not that the most important person in the world at that moment. And he's got so many, clips of him online of he just knows how to position people on stage or how to just kind of take over a show and just seat people in the, whether he is, legitimate or not. And I agree with you, but just his showmanship of knowing how to stand and how to handle people in a situation. There's a great shot of him just from the early 70s in his early career when he's super young. And he's just standing with a bunch of people holding their keys out and spoons out for him to bend, and he's just bending,
one after the other.
One thing. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, just that image of, all those things around him, like just being in. I still don't know of anyone. There have been lots of people who have copied his, abilities, whether legitimately or fraudulently. But I don't think anyone has been as compelling as him while doing it. And that to me is the big aspect too. Is whether or not it's kind of like juggling. We all have the ability to sit down and practice juggling 3 balls, but when someone can do 4, then 5, and then it's knives, and it's chainsaws, and they're taking the human capability to a place that we never could have imagined for entertainment. I mean, that is very, very much, and if someone can just sit there and just, do a stunt and be like, balance a chair on their chin and go, oh, you can tell I don't have a life. Or they can say, hey, I'm one of the few people in the world that can do this thing with this kind of chair. Do you all want to see it? And really get people excited for it. And that's very much what I try to bring to, all of my shows, and really try to, try to learn when I read these old books or watch old clips. I'm not looking to, copy them, but I'm looking to see, again, how they handle a microphone and how to project their humanity to an audience and so forth. And so a lot of that I'm very much self-taught on when it comes to that aspect.
In the places that are haunted that you've been to, Joe, have you ever been scared?
I've definitely been freaked out. I don't think I've ever been scared as in scared for my life or scared that I was going to be possessed or anything like that. I've definitely had moments of wow, or oh God, okay, nope, I'm done. I'm done. I gotta step away for a moment. There was a point of one of my recent trips to the Woodstock Opera House. It was actually down on the ground floor, and there is an object called a ghost light, which many theaters will have to just put out when they close up the theater for the night. There's lots of different tales and folklore about it. And the superstition is that you're leaving the ghost out for the ghosts in the theater. It's also a safety precaution. It allows whoever comes in to the room next, they don't have to be in this massive, giant, dark room by themselves and try and fumble around for a light switch. They had set it out, and I had forgotten something, so I went back in, grabbed my shoulder bag, just looked at the ghost light, and I just said, "Are you excited for Halloween as I am?" And the light just kind of, right at that moment, almost on cue, just kind of flickered a few times, and then grew a little brighter, and then went back to its usual, hue or intensity. And I just said, "I will take that as a yes. Thank you." And, I always say thank you. And I left it at that. And I definitely felt, I wouldn't say I was scared at that moment, but I definitely had a little bit of the goosebumps. And it's definitely the kind of feeling I want to try to give people in the show. And I've definitely noticed other people when a place like that definitely heightens these feelings in other people. In fact, I'll spoil this much too. The second act of the show, the opening line of it is, we're going to wait for everything to get super quiet. I'm going to step out, wait as long as possible, and just say, "You feel that, don't you?" You don't have to be psychic to know that there's something about this place. And you genuinely don't. Just being in that space it genuinely affects you. And I mean, you'd have to, I can't imagine it not affecting you on that level, especially this week, especially coming up on Halloween night. And I have noticed there's certain places where it definitely increases or it impacts the abilities of that most people do tend to naturally have.
There's no question about that. And what is it about the Midwest that so many places are haunted?
Yeah. It's we've got well for starters, we've got two major cities. Like I'm right in between. I'm equal distance from Chicago and Milwaukee, so a lot of stuff there. I mean, I think a big thing, at least with this specific town, it's got a lot going for it because, again, it's where Orson Welles grew up, and he brought so much. And he even said in many interviews he considered Woodstock home. And I don't know, and Ray Bradbury's from this area as well. I think it's just, at night all the cornfields just look like, empty black voids, kind of like the sky. So it's like, again, that's your mind runs with lots of imaginations there, but also, there's more people out here than I think people realize outside of the cities, and there's lots of history here as well. I'm also not far from where the Beast of Bray Road has been spotted many times as well, although I have not gone looking for that. I tend to, human beings freak me out enough in their minds. I haven't gone looking for any cryptids actively yet.
Do the places that you've been in increase people's abilities, psychic abilities, for example? Does it enhance it?
Definitely, and I've seen that happen definitely with the Opera House. Now, part of that could have been, I will play a little bit of skepticism on this, because I do think, skepticism can be healthy, especially when it comes to telepathy, because I think so many people have kind of blinded themselves to good and bad testing. Specifically with telepathy for some reason. I haven't fully decided for myself why that is. However, when I did a kind of similar to what we did last time I was on the show, where I thought of a memory and I projected it out to listeners, I do that a version of that on stage as well. And normally, like in a banquet hall, at like a corporate event or in other smaller theaters, I'll get about 70% coverage with everyone in that room. And in this theater, we had about 95% coverage with 411 people. We had there was only a handful of people who did not receive any correct thoughts when we were doing that experiment out of 411 people.
That's amazing statistics, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I mean, these were people who had, now granted, it was a larger sample size. Was it? So could there have been more group social pressure to say they had gotten it right? Maybe. I don't know. We're going to kind of take that a step further in the second half as well and see what other people can sense about the building without, we're going to do it under slightly more stringent conditions. And I don't want to say too much more about it because I told you what we were going to be testing with. If someone were to listen to this, go to americasgreatestminder.com, get tickets, make their way to see the show, and if they knew what was going to happen, that would, of course, influence it. So I don't want to go too much in depth with that, but we will have much more concise proof as to whether or not people can sense things about that building and its history, and see if we can get even more specific with even more people.
And that's going to be on Halloween night?
Yes, it's going to be this Friday, although we literally are down to like the last dozen tickets for this Friday, and the ground floor is completely full. But Halloween night, you can get set on the ground floor or in the balcony. It's an old school opera house. The balcony wraps completely around. The edge of the balcony is only about 8 feet from the stage, so not even a basketball hoop's distance. It's still very intimate. I actually was able to see some friends sat in the last row at the top of the balcony my first night there back in February, and I saw them, recognized them, could have said, "Oh, hi, Joni," like from the stage. Like it is still a very intimate space despite it being 411 seats. And again, especially, if anyone, and I do have a lot of people who hear me on the show who come to, who make the trek out through the Midwest to come to my shows.
Well, hold on, Joe. We're going to take a break and come back and take calls with you next hour.